The shelter was silent that evening. The air smelled of dust and old fear. Rows of cages lined the walls, filled with different alien children, some staring, some whispering, some hiding their faces. Yet in one dark corner sat a girl unlike the rest. She was smaller, thinner, her skin pale with faint glowing marks that pulsed weakly. She did not move when the human entered. She did not even raise her head. The caretaker, an older alien with rough hands, walked beside the human and whispered, "That one is dangerous. Don't look at her too long. She doesn't speak, doesn't eat properly. Nobody wants her. She has been here the longest." But the human's eyes stayed on the girl. She sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around herself as if the world outside was too heavy. Her eyes finally lifted just for a moment, and he saw it. An emptiness so deep it felt like staring into a broken star. He looked around. There were other alien children, some reaching through the bars, some calling out, begging to be chosen. But his attention never left the lonely girl. He asked the caretaker, "Why is she still here after all this time?" The caretaker shrugged, "Because no one wants her. Some say she is cursed, others say she brings misfortune. I would advise you not to waste your time, human." But inside the human's heart, something stirred, a strange pull, like destiny. He stepped closer to the cage. The girl flinched at the sound of his boots, her body shrinking back into the shadows. Her glowing eyes shimmered in fear, but also curiosity. He crouched down and spoke gently. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was calm, softer than the cold air of the shelter. The girl blinked, silent, as if the words were foreign. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she tilted her head, studying him like no one had ever spoken kindly to her before. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She was too afraid, too broken. The human felt anger at the thought. How could they leave her here, alone, unloved, judged only by rumors and fear? His hands gripped the bars tightly. He made a decision then, a choice that would change everything. "I'll take her," he said firmly. The caretaker blinked in shock. "Her? Are you serious? She will bring you trouble, human. You have no idea what you're asking for." The human only nodded. "Yes, her." His eyes burned with determination. The caretaker shook his head, muttering, "You'll regret this." As he unlocked the gate, the girl did not move even when the cage opened. She stared at the human like he was a dream she didn't trust. He reached out his hand, waiting. She hesitated, her small fingers twitching against her knees. Finally, with trembling movements, she placed her fragile hand in his. It was cold, almost weightless. Her skin felt like fragile glass. The human tightened his grip gently. He whispered, "You're safe now." For the first time, the girl's lips parted. A single word escaped, soft as a breath. "Why?" The question echoed inside him. Why indeed? Why had he chosen her, the one no one else wanted? He didn't know the answer yet, but he knew one thing. He could not walk away from her. As he led her out of the shelter, the other children stared, some with envy, some with confusion. The caretaker muttered behind him, "You'll see soon. She is not what you think." The human glanced down at the girl walking beside him. Her glowing eyes looked up at him again, uncertain, scared, and yet holding the tiniest spark of hope. He whispered again more firmly, "You're safe now, with me." And in that quiet moment, though neither of them understood it fully, a bond was formed, a bond that would shock everyone in the days to come. The sky outside was gray as the human guided the alien girl to his old hover car. Her steps were small and unsure, like she wasn't used to walking freely. She didn't speak, just looked around like every sound might be a trap. When he opened the passenger door, she stood still, staring at the seat like it was a test. Gently, he nodded and said, "It's okay, sit here. I'll be right beside you." She finally climbed in, her movements slow and stiff. Once inside, she pressed herself against the door as far from him as possible. Her hands clutched her knees, glowing fingers twitching with quiet fear. As the car started moving, she stared out the window. Her glowing eyes reflected the neon lights of the city, but her face stayed blank. He tried to break the silence. "My home's not big, but it's warm. You'll have your own bed." She didn't answer, not even a nod, just silence, heavy and sharp. At a red light, he glanced at her again. Something in his chest tightened. She looked like a ghost, not just in body but in soul. When they passed a small park, she suddenly whispered a word in her language. He didn't understand it, but her voice was filled with longing. Her face pressed against the window like she was remembering something or someone lost. "Do you want to stop?" he asked gently. She shook her head just once and returned to silence. By the time they reached his apartment, rain had begun to fall. He parked the car and turned to her. "We're here." She didn't move, not until he got out and opened her door himself. She followed, careful, like each step was on broken glass. Inside the building, neighbors stared. Some raised eyebrows, some whispered. One old woman muttered, "Why would a human bring one of those here?" He ignored them, but the girl heard it. Her shoulders tensed, and her head dropped. In the elevator, she spoke again, another alien word. Its sound. Did like pain or apology. "You don't have to be sorry," he replied softly. "You didn't do anything wrong." When they entered his apartment, it smelled like warmth, spices, fabric, and safety. The girl paused at the door, as if unsure she was allowed to enter. He motioned, "Come in, this is your home now." She stepped in, and her eyes scanned the room slowly. Her fingers brushed the edges of the table, the couch, the lamp, like she couldn't believe they were real. He showed her the small guest room, freshly cleaned, a bed with a soft blanket. She walked in and stood still at the foot of the bed, staring down at it with wide eyes. "You can rest here," he said. "Sleep as long as you like." Still no words, only slow movements. She sat down on the edge, touched the pillow with wonder. He left her alone for a while, letting her breathe, letting her feel. Later, he knocked gently on her door with a bowl of warm soup. She was sitting on the bed, legs crossed, still not touching anything else. He placed the bowl on the table. "You can eat, if you're hungry." As he turned to leave, he heard a tiny whisper, almost too soft to catch. "Thank you," she said, her voice broken and unsure, but real. He paused, smiled slightly, and nodded without turning around. "You're welcome." That night, as he lay in his own bed, he thought about her silence, her pain, her glowing eyes. He had no idea who she truly was or what story she carried, but he felt it. Something bigger was coming. Something no one could predict. And across the hallway, the girl sat alone in the dark, holding the spoon gently like it was a gift too precious for someone like her. The house felt different now. It wasn't just four walls and furniture anymore. It had someone new inside, someone quiet, someone watching. The alien girl moved like a shadow, silent and light. She never made a sound when she walked, never turned on lights, never closed doors loudly. It was as if she was afraid to take up space. The human noticed everything, how she waited for him to leave the kitchen before she entered, how she washed the spoon after every meal and put it back exactly where she found it. She never asked for anything, never complained, never smiled. He tried to talk to her gently, kindly, asking simple things. "Are you warm enough? Did you sleep okay?" But she always nodded or stayed silent. Her voice had disappeared again, hidden behind layers of fear. One morning, he found her sitting in the hallway, staring at a mirror on the wall, not looking into it, but at its edge, her face pale, her glowing eyes sad. When he asked what she was doing, she only whispered, "I don't like mirrors." He didn't push her, just nodded and moved the mirror away. She watched him do it with a strange expression, as if no one had ever listened to her before. The days passed slowly. The house became quiet, almost too quiet. Sometimes he wondered if she was even there, but then he'd find small signs, an empty cup, a folded blanket, soft footprints on the floor. At night, he often heard faint sounds, soft breathing outside his door. One time, even a quiet sob. But when he checked, she was gone, back in her room, hiding behind her silence. He started leaving small gifts for her. A soft scarf on the chair, a tiny music box that played earth lullabies, a cup of warm tea with honey. She never said anything, but sometimes he saw them moved, used, or carefully placed back. One evening it rained hard, lightning flashed through the windows, thunder shook the walls. He found her sitting near the front door, curled into a ball, her hands covered her ears, her body shaking. He sat beside her without a word and held out a blanket. She didn't move for a long time, then slowly she leaned into him. Her head touched his shoulder, just for a moment. "I don't like storms," she whispered, barely audible. "I know," he said gently. "You're safe here." That night, something changed. The next morning, he found her in the kitchen trying to pour water from a jug. Her hands trembled and she spilled some on the floor. She froze, eyes wide in panic. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back as if expecting punishment, but the human only smiled, grabbed a towel, and cleaned it up. "It's just water," he said. "Happens to me too." She stared at him confused, like kindness was a language she didn't understand. That evening, as they sat across the table, she finally asked, "Why do you keep being nice to me?" He paused, looked into her glowing eyes, and answered, "Because you deserve it." Her lips trembled as if trying to hold back something heavy. Later that night, he walked past her room and noticed something new. She had drawn something on the wall, a little picture of two figures, one tall, one small, standing side by side under a glowing sky, and next to it, written in shaky letters, were two words: "Thank you." The house was still quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. Now it had warmth, soft footsteps, and the beginning of something strange and beautiful. The next morning, the human found her sitting on the balcony, wrapped in the scarf he had left for her days ago. The wind played gently with her hair, and her glowing eyes stared out at the city skyline. He stepped outside quietly, holding 2 mugs of warm tea, one for himself and one for her. She didn't flinch this time, just turned her head slowly and looked at him. He offered the mug without saying anything. After a long pause, she reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed against his for the first time, and her hand didn't pull away. They sat together in silence. The sounds of distant traffic and early birds filled the space between them. But there was no tension now, only quiet understanding. After a few sips, she whispered, "What's your name?" He looked at her in surprise. It was the first question she had asked him. "I'm Ben," he said with a small smile. "And yours?" She hesitated, then replied, "Riva." Her voice was soft but steady this time. "Riva," he repeated gently. "That's a beautiful name." She looked away, as if unsure whether to accept the compliment, but her fingers tightened around the mug. That day, something shifted between them. She followed him into the kitchen and watched how he cooked. She didn't speak much, but she stood close, curious. He showed her how to make pancakes. Her first try was clumsy, batter spilled everywhere, but when she finally made one that didn't fall apart, she smiled, really smiled. It was small, barely there, but to Ben, it was brighter than sunlight. Later they sat on the couch and he showed her a picture book. Earth animals. He pointed at each one, letting her guess the names. She pointed to a cat and said, "Tiny tiger." He laughed, not to mock her, but because it was honest and clever. She blinked, then gave a shy smile again. For the first time, Riva began to speak more. Her words were quiet and sometimes broken, but they came from her heart. She asked, "Why did you come to the shelter?" Ben looked at her thinking, "I don't know," he said. "I just felt like I had to be there that day." She nodded slowly. "I didn't think anyone would pick me." "Why not?" he asked. Riva was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because I'm not normal." Ben leaned closer. "Normal is boring," he said gently. "You're something else, something special." She didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered again, not with fear, but with something warmer, something unfamiliar. That night, Ben walked past her room and saw the door open. Riva was inside, sitting on the floor, drawing again. This time, the picture showed a house with lights in the windows and 2 shapes, still side by side, but closer now. She looked up and met his eyes. He smiled and gave a small nod. She didn't hide the drawing like before, but as the lights dimmed, Riva looked out the window. Her expression grew tense. Her fingers clenched the edge of her drawing. Ben noticed the change. "What's wrong?" he asked from the doorway. She hesitated, then whispered, "They'll come for me." His chest tightened. "Who?" She looked down, her voice barely audible. "The ones who made me leave." A cold silence followed. He didn't know what that meant yet, but he saw the fear return to her eyes. He stepped inside, sat beside her, and said, "Then they'll have to go through me first." She turned to him, surprised. Her lips parted slightly and she nodded just once. And for the first time, Riva leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Riva didn't sleep that night. She sat near the window, wrapped in her blanket, her glowing eyes watching the stars above the city. Ben stayed awake too. He could feel something was coming, something heavy pressing on her chest. and he knew she needed to let it out. The next morning he found her sitting on the floor with the music box he had given her. It played a slow, soft tune, and she hummed along, out of tune but with heart. He sat down across from her, holding 2 cups of tea. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but then looked down. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything," he said gently. She took a deep breath. "I wasn't born like others." Ben listened carefully. She spoke slowly, choosing each word like it might hurt her. "My kind. We are trained to be perfect," she said. "Strong, fast, emotionless. No fear, no dreams, just obey." Ben frowned. "That sounds harsh." "It is," Riva whispered. "But I was different. I felt too much. I cried when others didn't. I asked questions when I wasn't supposed to." She paused, her voice shaking. "So they marked me." She pulled back her sleeve and showed him a small symbol on her arm, burned into her skin. It glowed faintly, a mark of rejection. "This means broken," she said quietly. Ben's hands curled into fists. "They hurt you for being yourself?" She nodded. "They said I was dangerous, because emotions lead to chaos. They said I would destroy balance." Her voice cracked. "So they took me away, locked me in a place far from my people. That's how I ended up in the shelter." Ben reached forward and took her hand. "You are not broken. You're the bravest person I've ever met." Her lips trembled. "You don't understand. They're still looking for me. They think I ran away, but I didn't. They threw me out like garbage." She pulled her hand back, suddenly angry. "Why do you care so much? I'm just an alien. I don't belong anywhere." Ben didn't flinch. He stood slowly and walked to his shelf, pulled down a small picture frame and handed it to her. It showed a young Ben, alone in a dark room, a child version of him holding a stuffed toy, face sad and lost. "I grew up in a place like your shelter," he said. "Humans didn't want me either. I was moved from house to house, always told I was too quiet, too strange, too much." Riva looked at the picture, then at him. "So you know," she whispered. "I know what it's like to feel unwanted," he said, "but I also know that kindness, even one act of it, can change a life." A long silence passed between them. Then Riva placed the picture down and hugged her knees. "When I first saw you at the shelter, I thought you would walk past me too." "But I didn't," Ben said, sitting beside her. "No," she said, looking at him with glassy eyes. "You saw me even when I didn't want to be seen." He smiled softly. "You deserve to be seen." That night, she didn't return to her room. Instead, she fell asleep on the couch with the music box still playing beside her. Ben sat nearby, watching the soft glow of her markings as she slept peacefully. He didn't know what the future held or how close danger truly was, but he did know one thing: he would protect her no matter what came next. Morning sunlight peeked through the windows, soft and golden. Riva sat at the table, tracing a finger over the wooden surface. Her eyes looked brighter than before, not full of fear, but full of thought. Ben stepped into the kitchen with 2 plates of toast. "Made breakfast," he said, placing one in front of her. She looked at the toast, then at him. Her hands moved slowly, picking up the food like it might vanish if touched too quickly. After the first bite, she looked surprised. "It's sweet," she whispered. Ben smiled. "Honey does that." She looked at the little golden jar beside the plate, her glowing eyes curious. She dipped her finger and tasted it again, and then, without warning, it happened. She smiled. A real, honest smile. Not a forced one. Not one shaped by fear, but a soft curl of her lips and a light in her eyes. Ben froze for a second, watching her like she was sunlight in the middle of a long winter. "You smiled," he said quietly. Riva looked down quickly, hiding her face behind the toast. "Did I?" "Yes," Ben nodded. "It suits you." She didn't answer, but her hands stopped shaking, and for the first time, she finished the entire meal. Later that day, they walked to the nearby market. People stared as usual. Humans weren't used to seeing aliens on this side of town, some whispered, some frowned, some even stepped aside as they passed. Riva stayed close to Ben, her hand clutching the edge of his jacket. Her glowing skin made her stand out, and she knew it. But she didn't let go. Not this time. At one stall, she paused, staring at a row of soft plush animals. There was a small blue one with big eyes that reminded her of something lost long ago, Ben noticed. "Do you like it?" She nodded slowly, just once. He bought it without asking, handed it to her with a smile. "He's yours now." She hugged it tightly, and again her lips curved upward. That night, as they sat together watching an old movie, Riva rested her head on his shoulder, the plush toy in her arms. She asked, "Why do they look at me like that?" Ben sighed. "Because they don't understand you, and people fear what they don't understand." She nodded. "They think I'm dangerous." "But you're not," Ben said. "You're kind and quiet and learning." "I'm still afraid sometimes," she whispered. "So am I," he replied. "But we face it together." She leaned into him, eyes slowly closing, but across the street, under the cover of darkness, something moved. A black vehicle hovered silently above the road, its windows tinted, and inside, a figure watched the apartment window through strange glowing lenses. A voice whispered inside the vehicle. "We've found her." The figure didn't respond, just stared at the silhouette of the alien girl resting against the human. Back inside, Ben walked Riva to her room, tucked a blanket around her shoulders, and left the door slightly open, just how she liked it. She whispered, "Good night, Ben." "Good night, Riva," he replied. As he walked away, a shadow moved behind the clouds above the city. The first smile had bloomed, but something darker had also awakened. It began with a knock, not loud, but firm and cold, the kind of sound that makes a person stop breathing for a second. Ben opened the door slowly. Two figures stood outside, tall, dressed in long black coats, skin pale gray, eyes covered by dark glasses that hummed softly with alien tech. Behind them floated a small black sphere, blinking red like it was recording everything. "Can I help you?" Ben asked, his voice calm but tight. One of them stepped forward, speaking in perfect Earth common. "We're looking for someone." Ben didn't move. "You've got the wrong address." The second figure raised a small hollow pad. "We believe a subject known as Riva 7 was seen in this sector. She is listed as an unstable biological unit and must be returned to her original caretakers." Ben's heart pounded, but his face stayed steady. "There's no one here by that name." The first figure leaned in slightly. "Are you sure, human? Harboring classified alien property is a crime." "She's not property," Ben snapped before he could stop himself. The second figure tilted his head. "Then you admit she's here." Ben paused, his jaw tight. "I admit nothing." From behind him, he felt a presence. Riva had come to the hallway. Her small body stood behind him, half hidden, but her eyes were wide and glowing. The visitor saw her, and both took a step forward. The floating sphere beeped faster. "Riva 7, the first figure said. "You are ordered to return with us. Your presence on this planet is unauthorized." She shook her head slowly. "No." Ben moved in front of her, his voice firm. "She's not going anywhere." The second figure pulled a small device from his coat. It lit up red, humming with energy. "If you resist, we are authorized to use force." Before Ben could answer, Riva stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was soft, but full of fear. "Ben, they will hurt you." He looked at her, his voice steady. "Let them try." The tension thickened. The visitors stared at Riva like she was a broken tool, not a person. "You do not understand her nature," the first one said. "She is a danger to herself and others." "She's a child," Ben replied, "and she's under my protection now." The second figure stepped forward. "She carries unstable genetic traits. We must remove her before damage is done." Ben clenched his fists. "Get off my doorstep." For a moment, the visitors said nothing. Then the sphere floated closer, scanning Riva from top to toe. She flinched, hiding behind Ben again. The first figure finally said, "We'll be back." Then they turned and walked away, disappearing into the black vehicle that hovered soundlessly down the street. The moment the door closed, Riva collapsed onto the floor, shaking. "They found me," she whispered. "They always find me." Ben knelt beside her and held her close. "They didn't take you. They won't." She looked up, her face pale and scared. "You can't stop them. They're not just soldiers. They're collectors." "Then I'll be the wall between you and them," he said firmly. She gripped his shirt tightly. "They'll come back stronger." I'll be ready, he promised. That night, he started reinforcing the apartment, adding locks, setting up old security tech, preparing for a war he never thought he'd face. And Riva, she sat beside the window, holding the plush toy he gave her, not smiling, just watching the sky, waiting for stars that didn't bring comfort anymore. That night, the apartment felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ben checked every lock, every sensor, every security screen. His hands moved fast, but his mind kept flashing back to the visitor's warning. Unstable biological unit, classified, danger. In the living room, Riva sat curled up on the couch, knees to her chest. Her eyes glowed dimly, flickering like a candle in the wind. She hadn't spoken since they left. Her fear wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the room. Ben walked over and sat beside her, not saying anything at first, just letting the silence be gentle instead of sharp. "They're going to come again," she whispered finally, "and next time, they won't ask." "I know," Ben said, "but they'll have to go through me." Her head turned slowly. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you're not a thing. You're not broken. You're someone who deserves to be safe." Riva looked down at her hands. Her fingers trembled, glowing lines moving beneath her skin. "You don't know what's inside me," she whispered. Ben leaned closer. "Then tell me." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I was part of a project. A secret one. My kind was trying to make something new. Stronger, faster, able to survive any world. But something went wrong." Her voice cracked. "I started changing. Not just in my body, but in my mind. I felt things, dreamed things. They said I was corrupted, but I think I became something else." She held out her hands and slowly, faint light swirled around her fingers, like stardust forming in the air. Ben stared, not with fear, but awe. "I can make things move without touching them," she said. "Sometimes I can feel people's thoughts when they're close, but I don't know how to stop it." Suddenly, a flicker of pain crossed her face, and she doubled over. "Riva!" Ben shouted, reaching for her. Her body seized her hook, glowing veins lighting up her arms and neck. Her breath came fast, eyes wide and full of panic. "I didn't mean to," she cried. "It's happening again." Ben wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. "Breathe. Just breathe with me." He spoke calmly, over and over, and little by little, the light faded. Her body relaxed, her breathing slowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his shirt. "I didn't want you to see that." "I'm glad I did," Ben replied, "because now I understand what they're really afraid of." She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Me? No," he said. "They're afraid of what you could become." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Ben smiled softly. "They tried to break you, but you're still here, still feeling, still fighting. That's not dangerous, that's powerful." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Then a light beep came from the front door panel. Ben jumped to his feet, checked the screen. No one was there, just static. But Riva stood up too, her face serious. "They're closer now, I can feel them." Ben looked at her. "Then we need to be ready." And as he looked into her glowing eyes, he didn't see a child lost or a weapon created. He saw a girl learning to stand on her own, and the fire inside her was just beginning to burn. The next day the sky was darker than usual, clouds covered the sun, and the city seemed to move slower, heavier. Ben stood near the window, watching the street below. He didn't need to check the cameras anymore, he could feel it too. "They're coming," Riva said quietly, standing beside him. Her hands were clenched, glowing faintly under the sleeves of her sweater. Ben nodded. "Do we run?" "No," she whispered. "We don't have time." A sharp beep came from the security screen. The outer doors of the building were overridden. Just like that. No warnings, no orders. "They're not knocking this time," Ben muttered. Riva turned to him, her face pale. "They'll hurt you if you try to stop them. Please, just give me to them." Ben looked at her like she had spoken poison. "No." "You don't understand," she said, stepping back. "They won't stop. They'll tear this whole place apart. You can't fight them." "I can't," Ben agreed. "But maybe We can. Her glowing eyes widened. You want me to use it? He nodded slowly. Only if you want to. Only if you feel ready. For a long moment, Riva stood frozen, torn between fear and something deeper. Outside, the hum of the black transport grew louder. The visitors had returned, but this time, they weren't alone. Several drones floated behind them, weapons charged. Ben, Riva whispered, if I lose control, I could hurt you. He stepped closer and placed a hand over hers. Then I'll take that risk. The door crashed open, the sound sharp like thunder. The collectors stepped in, their eyes glowing red through their visors. This is your last warning, human, one said. Release the prototype. She's not a prototype, Ben growled. She's a person. The second figure raised a weapon. Stand aside. Ben stood taller, but before he could speak again, a soft voice rose behind him. No, Riva said, stepping forward. Her glow was no longer faint. It was bright, alive. Her hair floated slightly and the air around her buzzed. You don't control me anymore, she said, voice steady like never before. The collectors didn't hesitate. The drones moved in, aimed directly at her. Ben shouted, Riva, now! In a blink, a wave of shimmering light burst from her. The air rippled and the drones froze in midair, sparks flying. Then one by one, they dropped to the floor, dead metal. The collectors raised their weapons, but Riva lifted her hands. Her eyes blazed with energy. I won't go back. The weapons shattered in their grip, exploding with a soundless blast of light. The visitors were thrown against the wall, not hurt, but stunned. The room went quiet again. Only the hum of her power remained, soft now, pulsing from her skin. Ben stared at her in awe, not fear. Riva turned to him slowly, breathing hard. I didn't lose control. No, Ben said, walking to her. You took control. She looked down at her hands, still glowing, but now steady, calm. Ben put a hand on her shoulder. You chose not to run. You chose not to be afraid. She nodded. I chose to stay. As the authorities arrived, responding to the explosion, the collectors were taken into custody. Ben told them everything, and for once, someone listened. That night, Riva sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. Her head rested against Ben's arm. I was always told I was a mistake, she said softly. But today, I felt strong. Ben smiled. Because you are. The next morning, sunlight returned to the sky, soft and golden. The city felt different, calmer, like something heavy had finally lifted. Inside the apartment, Riva stood by the window. Her glowing eyes watched the world below, not with fear this time, but with quiet curiosity. She was dressed in a soft earth sweater, sleeves a little long, and the plush toy rested in her arms. Her scars still glowed faintly, but now they looked more like stories than wounds. Ben entered the room with 2 cups of tea, the same way he always did, but something in his smile was different today, lighter. You slept well? He asked, handing her the cup. Riva nodded. I didn't have any bad dreams. That's a good sign, he said, sitting beside her. There was peace in the silence between them, not the old silence filled with fear, but the kind that felt like home. Later that day, someone knocked at the door, not with force, not with threats, but with respect. Ben opened it to find a woman in a clean uniform, her badge marked with the Galactic Refugee Council. I heard what happened, she said calmly. I'd like to speak with the girl. Riva stepped forward on her own. Her shoulders were square, her chin raised just a little. The woman knelt to her level. You don't have to hide anymore. The collectors are under investigation, and your case is being reviewed. Riva blinked. Will they come back? Not if we do our job right, the woman replied, but we need your help to tell the truth. Riva looked at Ben, and he gave her a small nod. I'll help, she said quietly, but I'm not going anywhere. The woman smiled. You don't have to. This is your home now if you choose it. After the officer left, Riva sat down with Ben at the table. She looked at her hands, then back at him. Do you think people like me can really live here? She asked. Ben leaned forward. Not only live, the return, give, grow, heal. I still feel different, she admitted. That's not a bad thing, he said. Different is how stars are born. She smiled, a real, warm, peaceful smile. In the days that followed, Riva started going outside. First short walks, then to the park. She would watch the birds, feel the breeze, even laugh sometimes. Children stared at her glowing skin, but some waved. Some even offered their toys, and she shared hers back. Ben watched her from a distance, always ready to step in, but slowly. She didn't need him to protect her from every look. One evening, Riva painted a picture and hung it in the living room. It showed a small, alien girl holding hands with a human under a sky filled with stars. Ben looked at it and smiled. Is that us? Yes, she said, because you saw me when no one else did. He sat beside her, and you reminded me that being human isn't just about blood. It's about heart. As night fell, Riva sat by the window again, but this time she wasn't waiting for danger. She was watching the stars like old friends, like they finally welcomed her. She whispered something in her alien tongue, then translated it slowly. I am not broken. I am becoming. Ben nodded beside her. You always were. And in that small apartment under a sky full of light, the loneliest alien girl the shelter had ever seen was lonely no more. She was home.